And so the story in Red Bank is really the story of what we associate with someone like Martin Luther King in the 1950s and 1960s, but Fortune was doing that in New Jersey, and the success of it built the foundation for what we would consider the Harlem Renaissance and the emergence of people like Ida Wells Barnett and W.E.B. Du Bois. In Red Bank, you really see the culmination of his dreams. This was the place where what he had set out to do 30 years earlier had finally come to pass, and he could begin to build, using his prominence, a political and cultural movement to liberate and uplift African Americans. And so for 10 years, he is organizing churches and political meetings and campaigns to support or to campaign against people hostile to African American rights. The idea of a strong Black middle class in a relatively small resort community, there was so much of that across the North and the Midwest that built what made it possible for the Brown versus Board of Education decision. The civil rights struggles in the North and in the Midwest basically are the fruit of Fortune's vision. Being 2 blocks off of Shrewsbury Ave and essentially the heart of what was a growing solid Black community that was tied to a lot of really prosperous white families up on the north side of Red Bank. Those families were all looking for ways to build institutions. So if you look around the area, you're going to notice 3 or 4 major Black churches. We know, of course, Carrie Fortune helped found St. Thomas Episcopal, but that's a signal. That's a sign that they're building schools and institutions to kind of make new opportunities for their children and their grandchildren. And the fact that Fortune's son, coming through Red Bank High School, is the only African American during his time, he goes on to be a physician. This is unprecedented. Beyond the fact that you have a working class family like the Baseys that have a little boy, and he sees the possibility of Black transformation and goes on to become one of the top 2 or 3 jazz musicians in American history. The isolation and the rise in crimes and this backlash against the civil rights movement has a really terrible impact on Black families in Red Bank. So there are very few left. Most of the West Side is now Latino, Chicano immigrant community. And so there isn't the same Black middle class legacy that had been there that Fortune had built. And so we face a moment where now we need to very purposefully do more than just preserve the Fortune House itself, but to preserve the legacy of African American history in Red Bank and find ways to build new industry that then draws new Black families to the community. We have to look to the future so that our children and grandchildren will have more opportunities, that the barriers that Fortune dismantled aren't erected again.